Hi, this is Phoebe English, and you are listening to the Wasted Hour podcast.
Hello, this is Martin, and you're listening to the Wasted Hour podcast, the podcast about fashion, artists, inspiration, and creative culture. And I'm very happy to introduce today's guest, fashion designer from London, Phoebe English. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us. I've been really looking forward to doing this podcast with you because, like, on the first hand, I got so many questions and I'm so curious about a lot of things. And because I would love to talk to you, of course, like about your background, how you got into fashion, and obviously also about the whole sustainable approach that you're having with your label. But the first question that I'm having is, I read once that when you grew up, you wanted to be an actress first. And what's your favorite actress at the moment, or like in general?
Ooh, gosh, that's such a good question. Nobody ever asks me about that period of my life. Long time ago now. I would say probably some of the kind of RSC theatre actors, probably like Dame Judi Dench, Helen Mirren, you know, the actors from that kind of era that have kind of, you know, it's a tough industry, and, you know, those actors that have kind of, you know, managed whole careers in that tough industry, always I have great respect for. So yeah, I'd say that kind of generation of actor would be my favourite, but I couldn't pick one single one.
Yeah, there are so many. There are so many good ones.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
Did you like play theatre when you were younger, or?
Yes, I did a lot. Gosh, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this. It's like trying to remember all these things. It's nice to think about these things. Yeah, I did a lot of that. A lot of youth theatre. A lot of that. I mean, that really was everything I was doing as a teenager. I was not so much of a kind of having band posters on my bedroom wall, and I wasn't so much having boyfriends, and, you know, I was just really just doing a lot of theatre, a lot of acting, a lot of youth theatre groups, and, you know, I think at one point I was doing like 4 workshops a week as well as doing it in school. And, you know, obviously over the weekends, and then I would be in different plays. I think, you know, when I was a teenager, I was in like 2 different theatre productions at the same time, maybe over a Christmas period. And then I'd also be, you know, part of doing youth theatre groups in the week, and then also doing drama at school as well. So it really was like my whole teenage years. Gosh, I haven't really talked about this for a long time. It's quite nice to think about it. But yeah, I was a part of a group called the Playbox Theatre Group, which is quite a large youth theatre group in Warwick in the Midlands, and they're quite professional, actually. You know, like a lot of films come through there to audition. I think I did an audition for Harry Potter at one point. So it's quite you know, I did amazing stuff. Like, we did a production of Peter Pan, and I was the understudy for the Never Never Bird, so I got to do some aerial work, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So,
which role did you apply for in Harry Potter?
I think it was just a general audition, but I think I read a Moaning Myrtle piece and a Hermione piece, I think, at one point. So yeah,
one of my
favorites.
favorites.
It was one of those big group auditions where lots of people go, but yeah. Another
Cool.
lifetime ago.
Was this already in London or in another part of the UK?
This is in the Midlands, so sort of quite near Birmingham, Warwickshire, Stratford-upon-Avon area. So yeah, and then when I moved to London, I was very much in the fashion stage of my life.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because I read that you grew up in a creative family. So did one of your parents got you into acting in the first place?
Yeah, I have an extremely creative family. My mother is a painter and a poet and a musician. She's actually a punk from the 70s. She was
Wow.
also a performer in her own right. So she was, part of those very, very early punk feminist theatre groups, which were really avant-garde, and did a lot of set design for them, as well as performance in her punk bands called Cheap and Nasty. And my father is a land artist, so quite different from my mum. They're got quite different styles, and does like huge field size artworks. And then all my aunts are performance artists or sculptors or leather workers, or my grandfather was a carpenter. So yeah, I mean, everyone's quite creative. I've got another aunt who's an illustrator, so the art gene is quite strong.
Yeah,
And
totally.
there's like an element of performance in there as well. I was always putting on plays when I was little, and all that kind of stuff was very much encouraged. We weren't allowed to eat our dinner until we'd drawn a picture of it, that kind of thing, and we were allowed to draw all over the walls all over the entire house. We had huge dressing. Our whole bedroom would be a dressing up box. We wouldn't just have a box in the corner. There was just amazing clothes all over the place, because I guess it was a creative household, so that kind of went with it. But I thought that was normal. That I didn't really realize that was a slightly different kind of way to be brought up. But yeah.
But I think like that's normal when you are like growing up, because that's all you know, and your whole world consists like of your house, and it is not like the your first grade or second grade that you're visiting like other children and you see like, oh, that looks a little bit different, but still like everything that you have is you take granted for normal.
Exactly, and I mean, I think my whole world was the art world. I mean, I grew up in a theatre town, so there was always theatre happening as well. I grew up in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is where Shakespeare was born, and we actually lived basically next door to Shakespeare's birthplace, just on the same road. And there was always Shakespeare theatre going on, and art, and we weren't really taken to like children's holidays. We were taken to art galleries, and we'd have to like make a den underneath the canapé table. So we were just, my sister and I were just always in a gallery, or with my dad on a field burning images across the whole field with a camera crew. And it was I wouldn't say it was a super bohemian childhood, but it was because it was quite a structured childhood, but it was definitely very creative.
Yeah, you've been surrounded
Luckily
by art. Yeah, from the first moment. Oh, great to hear! I didn't know about all of that. I just read that you grew up in a creative family, but I didn't know about the full extent to it. But you said that
the art gene is strong.
Runs deep. Yeah. How did fashion come into place? Because I think when you were around like 18, you worked for a couturier in Paris. How was your interest sparked for fashion, and how did you ended up like working in Paris?
I always was very, very interested in fashion. It's my earliest memories. Some of my really early memories are of things like collar details on my dresses as a baby, like really liking a particular ribbon on one of my dresses but not liking the finish, like always like having opinions about those was some of my really, really early memories from being a baby.
Yeah, and also an eye for the detail from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd always be like, oh, well, we're going rowing on the river today, so I'll put together a rowing outfit. So I'd put like a little straw hat and like a stripy skirt and a stripy shirt. I loved getting dressed and like thinking of what outfit suited. If I went to a birthday party, I'd go try and find like a special like birthday outfit, and I just loved kind of getting dressed for different things. And so I guess it was always there. And then I also really liked theatre and acting, and that didn't really work out. I got to the age of 18 and I'd finished my A-levels, and I hadn't really got into any drama schools, which is really very much what I'd planned to do. So I was kind of a failed actress before I'd even started. So I just went and did an art foundation course, which is a one. I don't know if you guys have it in Germany, but in the UK you do a 1-year art course when you finish your A-levels, when you finish high school, and then you kind of try lots of things. So you try sculpture and you try photography and film and then fashion and textiles, which is obviously something I was already doing a lot of anyway. I was making my own clothes and stuff.
Yeah.
But while I was doing that course, my aunt, who is a performance artist, introduced me to her friend who was her long-term friend, but also had made costumes for her work. Who was a man called Mr. Pearl, a corsetier called Mr. Pearl. And I was just completely blown away and absolutely instantly obsessed with this person and their incredible work. And he was doing a project, and my aunt very kindly arranged for me to go and help him when I was 18 at the time. So she took me to Paris, and she had arranged for me to stay with one of her friends. So I stayed in the spare bedroom of her friends, and every day I would walk across the Seine and I would go to the Ile de la Cité and I would work in his atelier, sewing Swarovski crystals all over these amazing creations in this magical studio. And it was really a very much a transformative time in my life, which I will always really cherish. It was a real, I guess, realization of who I was and what I connected to and what I loved. And it was a very special time seeing work like that and being able to have access to it, and also to learn from him and to listen to all the stories about how the fashion industry worked. It gave me this really amazing insight into this industry I had no idea about but loved. I'd had a Vogue subscription from another aunt for a Christmas present, and I was obsessed with fashion, and it was quite amazing to suddenly be able to hear about all these big names that were in these magazines and from someone that knew them. So it was quite an amazing exposure at quite a young age to something that incredible.
Yeah. Did she knew about like the designer world before, or like the names, or what was going on in fashion, or?
Not really. I mean, I just really like getting dressed up and dresses and high heels and, looking at photo shoots and magazines and the fantasy attached with it, I always really loved that. But I wouldn't say like I knew like what a fashion week was or who, I don't know, John Galliano was. I mean, I knew things like what Chanel was and what Dior was and stuff like that, but I didn't really know how it all worked. And, it was very much an outsider kind of having this sort of inside exposure.
Yeah.
And also being in Paris for the first time. And
yeah, I wanted to ask about that. How did you experience Paris? Was it your first time there?
Yeah, it was my first time there, and we hadn't really sort of done lots of travelling when I was growing up. I hadn't sort of been on aeroplanes going to foreign countries. We'd been going to like Wales or Ireland and camping and stuff. So it didn't have like a super, exotic holiday childhood. So this was a really exotic adventure coming to Paris. And obviously, the atelier was next door to Notre Dame. So, every hour or every midday you'd have to stop work because the noise from the bells was just deafening. It was absolutely, it just kind of washed over you. It was a really extraordinary experience working in a space like that. And then you'd come out and be surrounded. I was there during the spring, and all the beautiful leaves were coming out in the trees, and the spring sunlight, and this amazing architecture and these ancient streets and those wonderful old Parisian doorways and all those
It's
things.
magic.
It was really magic. And that, but obviously naively at the time, I thought that's what Paris was, because it was, it was the only thing I'd seen. But I was totally transported by this really magical time there, sort of sewing away every morning and afternoon, and just being in this magical place. It was totally extraordinary.
Yeah. Later on, you started studying at Central St. Martin's. How much time was in between, like your internship in Paris and then your decision to start studying there?
So there wasn't any time, actually. I remember being in the atelier and trying to ring people, trying to find some kind of lodgings or something in London, because I'd realised, while I was there, I had to take a few days off, and I had to go back on the Eurostar to have my interview at St. Martin's. So I took all my portfolio from Paris to London to have the interview, then I took it back again, and then whilst I was there, I got the acceptance letter. So I was I'd applied very, very late to that university. I hadn't picked up the courage to apply there. I didn't think I would be good enough to get in.
Okay.
So I applied really right at the end, I think on the final day of the window, because I just wasn't confident enough that I would get in. The way it works in the UK, well then anyway, I don't know if it works like that now, is you choose 3 universities. You choose your first choice, your second choice, and your third choice. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get your first choice, something it meant you couldn't do your second or something like that. So it was quite anxious making to kind of, this is your only chance, you know what I mean? So yeah. I'd really left it late. And then I got this letter saying, you've got in, and I was sort of in Paris, and I was like, I'm going to have to quickly find somewhere to live. Oh my God, I'm going to have to literally go straight from here to starting university in London, which was all, it was quite a strange year, because also whilst I was in Paris, I was also still on my course in Warwickshire, doing my foundation course. So I was having to kind of do my coursework in the nighttime and do my work from Mr. Pearl in the daytime. So it's kind of all this sort of layers of different things happening at the same time. It was a really exciting year. And I just went straight from there to London and managed to find somewhere to lodge. I think he was actually a friend of Mr. Pearl, had some subletting space on Brick Lane, so we basically just moved to Brick Lane with my good school friend. So there was 2 of us, I think 3 of us, living in a 1-bedroom flat at one point there. So that was also another story. But it was quickly rushing to find somewhere to live.
But Brick Lane isn't like the worst place to start. So Brick Lane is actually like the first place, or like the first street that I've been to when I first visited London too. And it was like a Sunday, and there was Brick Lane Market, and it was like it was sunny, it was June, and I was like just like falling in love with London on the first day that I've arrived. And like you in Paris, I had like the idea, it's like this every day. Yeah.
Well, Brick Lane really it's quite different there now, but at that time, I think that must have been around 2006 when I moved there, and it was literally kind of exploding as this kind of destination, and it was quite amazing to live there during that time and witness that massive gentrification happening, and
Yeah.
all these incredible musicians and artists and fashion people, and it was almost like a festival all the time. It was amazing.
Yeah, and when I was around that time, and I was like sitting in Munich listening to Block Party, and I just heard like East London is a vampire, it sucks the life or something like that out of me, and in my head I was like, I need to be in East London. That's where it's all happening.
Yeah, oh gosh, that was actually Block Party was really like the anthem of that time and that street for sure. Yeah, it was amazing, and a lot of people I knew lived around there, and that was really fun. You could just kind of go from one neighbour to another, because there wasn't really kind of halls of residence. St Martin's isn't really a kind of campus university experience. You very much have to kind of find your own way. So it can be quite lonely moving to London like that, because you don't really have like student union or a uni bar to go to. Like, you just all go to the gay bars, and that's kind of what you have, and that's what we did. We go to these amazing boombox parties on Hoxton Square, and that's kind of how we all became friends.
So how was it for you studying at Central St. Martin's? Because I've once read an interview that you said you had such a weird time there, like, which is like positive and negative at the same time. That's how I understood it. Yeah,
I guess it was positive and negative. I think because I'd been in Paris, it was a bit of a shock. It was a bit of a shock going from working with a couturier to being at a fashion school. I kind of, because what I'd been learning was this like precision and exquisite finishing and laboured, handmade quality, like epically gorgeous silks and crystals and all these things, and suddenly kind of just being in Brick Lane and being in fashion school where everything's quite raw was such a big contrast. And it was really, because I'd been so immersed in that, that's really what was my experience of fashion, and that's what I kind of was learning about. And then suddenly being in this completely other kind of approach where everyone's learning from scratch, and it's quite scrappy and it's very expressive and really raw. It was really difficult, and I didn't think at that time, I don't think I was very confident. I was very, very shy. I think I was probably a little bit lonely because I didn't really feel like I fitted in that well. And I did struggle at the first year. I was really not very happy at all. I felt quite out of place, and I didn't really have like a defined kind of theme to my work. I just was still really trying a lot of stuff out, and I think like the foundation course I'd been on was an art foundation. It was really based in kind of conceptual installations. And a lot of the other people on the course had either come from other fashion degrees, so they already knew exactly what they were doing, or they'd come from St Martin's Foundation, which was very fashion driven, so they really knew how to research fashion, and they knew how to do a fashion sketchbook, and they knew how to do toiling and all these things. I was just completely clueless, and my work was just all over the place. And I think in the second year I moved courses because I was very unhappy on the course that I was on. It just wasn't working out for me. And I think it was basically because, there's a lot of different ways of doing fashion. And luckily, St Martin's isn't really a university that dictates how you should and shouldn't do fashion. It's very much about exploring your own personal, expressive, artistic voice and doing it in the way that suits you the best. But it did take me a while to figure out what it was that I was interested in. And I think that's one of those things about being a student is, you're a young person, you don't know who you are yet, you're still discovering that. And, it's hard to kind of define what your work is and run with it if you still don't know who you are, So I think in my second year I moved course and I moved on to the knitwear course, and that suited me a lot better because I'm very much more of a making designer rather than a referential designer. I wouldn't go and spend, 12 hours in the library photocopying hundreds of books and then refer to that silhouette or that shape from, I don't know, an 18th century illustration, or I wouldn't kind of look up, I don't know, Alexander McQueen 1991 spring summer collection and reference that. It just wasn't how I worked, and I was kind of surrounded with people that were working like that, which made me feel a bit, I guess, self-conscious and sort of definitely out of place. But when I moved on to the knitwear course, it definitely was kind of an awakening. I already knew how to knit, and I think just kind of trying to find your own way of working. I could make loads of samples, but I wasn't going to do a sketch based on a fashion research image and then make that. It just wasn't how I was going to work, and I'd sort of slowly found my place and my strengths, and then it was much better after that. But yeah, I was very lost at the beginning.
Yeah, but it's like so hard, because I think like looking back now at studying, I think like you should take all the time to find out who you are. But when I started studying, I had the feeling I have to be ready already, just like from the beginning on, and just like finish it out. And now I'll be like, no, like those years in university are just a possibility to find out who you are, what you want to do, fail, and like orientate yourself. And but back then, like looking around, I was like, oh my god, everyone knows what they're doing, they have it all figured out, and I felt also like so far behind for everything.
And I think that's one of those things, and I do a lot of teaching now, and I do feel quite worried for these students, because obviously now they're graduating with Instagram. Back then there wasn't any social media, and I think some students are already Instagram and TikTok celebrities before they've even finished their first year. And to think about that now, I could barely even walk into the university with a sketchbook, let alone actually put it on a public platform on the internet. So, I was so self-conscious. And I think, that space of when you're learning just to kind of make mistakes and just figure things out and develop things in privacy is really valuable.
Yeah. When did you think about starting your own label? Like during university, was it all planned out, or?
No, it absolutely was not planned out at all. I think I was just very naive. I liked making things. I was really interested in fashion, and there wasn't like a particular reason why I was studying. I didn't have any plans of what I was going to do with it or what direction I was going to take it in. I was just kind of very naively just going from one thing to the next thing, one project to the next project. Oh, I finished my first year. Oh, I finished my second year. Oh, I've graduated. And then I went on to do an MA and finished that. But, it was, there were some people that were on that MA course that, was specifically there because they wanted to set up a fashion label. Mm-hmm. But for me, I was just there because I like to make things. And it was just the next progression in order to carry on making things. And I think I always knew that I didn't want to work in fashion. I didn't want to work somewhere. I don't think that would have really suited me. And I think I did know that. But also I wasn't really that interested in shopping. And, I liked clothes, but I wasn't like obsessed with them. I just literally really enjoyed making things. And like that process of kind of taking nothing and making something that just appears from nothing. It really excited me, and being part of a team, obviously going back to kind of my love of theatre and that collaborative experience where you make something as a group. And a fashion show kind of is a show, it's a form of a show. So I kind of was really into that kind of side of things, but I don't think I really knew why I was doing it. I didn't really have like a reason why I was doing it. And I finished the MA and we did the final show, and I was very lucky to win some prizes when I graduated, and I had a lot of press contacting me all of a sudden. I mean, I'd never used my email address. I think I checked my email maybe like once every 2 months or something. I didn't really know how email worked. wasn't really part of my world. And then suddenly I was getting all this like stylists emailing me and wanting to borrow pieces for shoots, and it was really overwhelming. And one of the emails I got was from someone who wanted to buy one of my dresses.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept saying, you know, like, I don't think you want this dress. Like, you know, it's really a creative piece. It's, you know, an expressive piece. It's made from acrylic hair. Like, you really don't actually want to own this. I promise you. Like, this isn't something. She just kept emailing and she kept emailing. And eventually she, you know, I agreed for her to come and meet me, and she came to the house I was living in, and you know, this amazing person walked in, and I just knew instantly that this was a special person. Like, the second she walked in, I was like, I've met someone special. This is literally an important person that's come through the door now. And she was, and her name's Rose Easton, and we, you know, she ordered a dress, and I kept trying to dissuade her, but she really wanted one. So I made her one, and then, you know, a few weeks later, she asked me if I wanted to go for a gin and tonic. So we went for a gin and tonic, and she, you know, basically was like, well, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to come and work with you because you clearly need some help. And that was it. I was like, okay. You know, I didn't know her at all. Didn't know anything about her really, and we'd met like once. But it kind of was a very instinctive thing, you know.
Because it felt right.
Yeah, it felt right, and I think it's important to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and I knew there were so many things I wasn't very good at. Like, I never remember what day of the week it is. I didn't know how to check my email. Like, you know, I just didn't have any of the business side at all. And, you know, she was like, okay, we need a studio. So then I was like, okay, I'll get a studio. So I got a studio, and then we were offered a small show, like a really small show with an organisation called Fashion Scout, which is still going now. And he kept emailing me, and I'd kept ignoring the emails. And then he somehow got my number, and he kept calling me, and I kept ignoring the calls. And then I accidentally picked up the phone once because I hadn't looked at it, because I usually just ignored everything. And then he kind of persuaded me to do a show. So we decided to do a really small collection, and that's what we did. I did like 8 looks, and then Dover Street Market ordered it. So the next day we registered the company, and that was 10 years ago, 2 months ago. So yeah, it was not a plan at all. It was quite a long, convoluted series of fatalistic events.
Yeah. I think like from the beginning, your label was like based on the principle of sustainability and also like craftsmanship. From the very first moment, which you're still, of course, like doing today. And I just wanted to ask, because obviously your label is around for like 10 years, and I think like being like an independent label for like 10 years is so amazing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the changes like over the past 10 years, and how did at first like the whole sustainable approach came into the picture when you started?
Yeah, well, you're right. We did, you know, it was founded on craftsmanship and handmade textiles. And, you know, some of the very early things we were making were taking like 3 or 4 days to make one garment. So it was about slow fashion and craftsmanship from the outset. And also, you know, I'd done internships in New York and stuff, and it was, you know, from places which were doing like launching a whole collection every month, and you know, everything was produced on the other side of the planet. And I think I knew from that experience that I never really wanted to be part of that. I didn't want to be making big quantities really fast and shipping them all over the place. It just seemed really not very sensible to me. To be honest, it just felt really illogical. So I knew that I didn't really want it to be, if I was going to do it, I knew I didn't want it to be done in that way. So I guess it was about making sort of precious things slowly and carefully, and you know, finding an audience that understood that and appreciated it. And yeah, so we set up and we were really only making in the UK, so it was about localized production rather than sort of production far away and shipping lots of things everywhere. And then I guess, you know, like I don't think sustainability was a focus for us. There was some times where I tried to kind of start the brand sort of moving in that direction. There was a few things, you know, I tried to use organic cotton, but it maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and that was really hard because there wasn't very much option and it was extortionately expensive and it just didn't work out. And you know, then I did a collection where we were trying to use only fabric that was unbleached and not dyed, and that didn't really work out because it was really hard to sell. So I tried to kind of start going in that direction, and it just hadn't been the right moment and just hadn't really kind of had the right momentum, I guess. And
you were too early.
Maybe too early, yeah. Maybe you're right, yeah. Thinking about it might have just been a little bit too early. I mean, as a way of working, it's ancient, obviously, but you know, it hasn't, I think, like sort of large scale research and awareness, it's only around kind of 10 years that people have been kind of actively trying to get the fashion industry as we know it kind of, you know, in moving in that direction. So it is relatively young, and there's so many more options than there used to be, which makes it actually possible for someone like me to work in this way. And that's the thing, is it's only really possible if the whole industry is being part of it. You know, you need the buyers to be knowledgeable about these choices they're making, so that the customers can be knowledgeable about these things, so that the consumer desire can feed back to the purchasing power, that for, you know, feeds back to the designers, and you know, their choices, you know, affect the farmers, and the farmers' choices, you know, affects the soil and all those things. So it's only when we're all doing it at the same time that it's actually possible, because it's a huge interconnected industry. So yeah, I think just doing it on your own, and there's lots of brands that have been trying to do it on their own for very long lengths of time, it is much harder, because you don't have the support of fabric choice or fabric option, and you don't have the support of consumer desire. So I'd say that the last 2 years we've really made it our main focus. And I came into the studio, you know, my personal awareness of the climate crisis and the level of ecological breakdown that we're now facing had really come to a head, and I'd really begun to understand how the fashion industry was negatively impacting all of those things to a huge scale that I had been previously unaware of. And I guess despite being a really small company and a small tiny speck on the landscape that is the fashion industry, I really felt that we needed to make active change across the entire business, no matter how small it was, because it needed to happen across the entire industry. And if there wasn't people that were beginning to take those steps, then we would never get anywhere, and I needed to play my part in taking those steps. So, you know, it was lots of different things that kind of brought this awareness about. There were documentaries being released, and there was, you know, the Extinction Rebellion takeovers of central London, which I was there for, and, you know, trying to work out, you know, this realization that I am directly responsible for this because I am part of the fashion industry. No matter how small my part is, I am still part of it. So how can I be part of this and also be part of the solution? So, you know, I came into the studio and I was like, right, from today, this is a plastic-free studio. Now we are eradicating all plastic from our packaging, and that's very much where we started. We just started with our packaging. It's a huge subject, and I had no idea where to start. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't know who could help me. But I realized two things. Like, I needed time, and I needed conversation. And in order to have conversation, I needed time. So we took ourselves off the schedule and reduced our collections just to 2 a year rather than 4 a year. And that suddenly kind of gave us a good amount of extra time. And then I was able to start talking to people. And every person I spoke to, every conversation I had, led to another solution. Or if it didn't lead to a solution, it led to somebody else who could lead to a solution. So it was very much just about talking and having the time to talk in order to learn and inform myself so that I could make better choices as a designer and as a business owner.
Yeah, because from the beginning it was obviously also like the size of your collections as well. Not only that you were doing like 2 year, but you also reduced like the looks, and you were not putting out like 45 looks collections, which is like...
Yeah. I mean, we never did really big collections, because it just always felt very wasteful. But yeah, we reduced the collection size dramatically, and we got a lot of very negative response about that. I remember we had one review that was like, 8 looks does not a collection make, or something like that. And it was I was really annoying, because I was like, we really don't understand why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this to kind of irritate you, you know? I'm doing this to avoid the waste, and also to make sure that every single thing that goes into the collection is there for a reason. It's not just there to fill up SKU space, like everything has to have actually a meaning and an intention behind it. It's not just like a thing that I'm making for no apparent reason, just to kind of fill up a space on a line sheet. So yeah, it didn't have like, at that time it just didn't really like register with people why I was doing that. And I didn't really talk about it until maybe the second collection I'd been working on in this way. I think it's, a big mistake that a lot of companies make, where they talk about sustainable choices or best practice choices and changes in their business, and they make these huge press announcements, but they do it before they've done the thing, and I think it's much better to do the thing and then talk about the thing. Yeah, I think you've been for me, you've been one of the first designers doing it in such like a straight way. And also like, of course, the whole made in England approach, it's also like in a small radius where you produce your clothes, resonated with me very much too. And when it was the first time we met you at the showroom in Paris, and I had the possibility to touch the clothes as well, I was just amazed by the fact how you like developed new fabrics and how it would eventually like feel when you're putting it on and like everything, because like you recycled stuff like the old care labels, and just like it was so refreshing to see. Yeah, and I guess it's exactly that, Martin, is our clothes are about touching. They're not necessarily only about looking. And I think, as a designer, you kind of begin to realize that your clothes exist on so many different planes. You have the actual physical garment, and then you have the fact that it just is in existence for so many people just as a tiny image on a phone, but ours is very much, it's about touching, it's about how it feels on the body, how it fits on the body. So it's a very much an in real life experience. We're not like a digital brand that designs on a digital platform and the clothes just appear in a box from a factory we've never been to in a country that's far away. We make them from scratch by hand, every single stage in this room behind me. And it's about the team touching it. It's about my friends coming in and trying stuff on. And it's about a tangible link between the maker and the product that we make. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad that comes across when you come and see the clothes, because you never know, what people see in them. So,
no.
But yeah,
I think I totally got it from from the first moment on. And I own a few pieces myself, and I'm totally in love with them. And from the reactions I got from some of the customers, I can just pass it on that they are in love with the pieces, because they say it's so special, and it's something like different to things that you're wearing, and like 2 months later you're not as interested in them anymore as you were in the beginning, but it's like something that stays with you a little bit longer.
Oh, that's so nice. That's really nice. Well, I mean, that's really one of the aims, is that, you know, we never know if our pieces are successful until we see someone still wearing it in 5 years or 6 years. You know, like they should be pieces that can travel with you through your life, and that don't, you know, just become something that was fashionable a few years ago. You know, it's got to be something that can keep going.
Yeah, I think you also stepped it up, like even more, like with the Nothing New collection. What's the concept behind Nothing New?
I think with the Nothing New collection, I guess that was a culmination. I think it was a collection that I was actually working towards for 4 seasons. You know, to get to that point, I had to do these 3 other collections, you know, beforehand to get to this 4th collection. And I guess it was kind of a showcase, but also, you know, I felt like I needed to do something. Maybe I'm sounding dramatic, but I needed to do something extreme with how we were making things, in order to respond to the extremeness of the situation that we're in. You know, we are in a really extreme ecological time. I mean, there's lots of extreme things going on at the moment, and you know, is it really kind of logical to carry on doing things in the same way that we've been doing them in, whilst these really extreme things are happening? And for me, it isn't, you know, and I really feel that, you know, that we need to be thinking of really, sorry, my sister keeps ringing. You know, we need to think about really active, drastic things that can change the way that we are using the Earth's bounty, if that makes sense. And for me, that was to entirely stop using virgin resources. So just to stop buying any new fabric at all for 1 season. And it was almost like a challenge, you know, is it physically possible for me to make an entire collection and all of the subsequent production from fabric which already exists, that's already in my local vicinity, and that is from people that I've managed to speak to about these things, in order to try and also encourage them to be thinking in this way as well. So it was kind of, you know, it was a kind of, the title Nothing New is it's supposed to be an interrogation. It's supposed to be a little bit, you know, interrogating, because as we all know, fashion has this fetishizes the new, and youth, this youthful newness, you know, it's always kind of fetishized that. And it's about, you know, seeing if I could change the system dramatically whilst reducing how much I was importing. And we managed to do it. It was really logistically challenging.
So where did you get the fabrics from?
Yeah, so I basically just started messaging as like, you know, where am I going to get all these fabrics? How can I entirely locally source fabrics when there's absolutely no fabric production, hardly any left in the UK whatsoever, because we don't have any manufacturing in the UK anymore. We have very, very little. So it was about, you know, sourcing waste and surplus. And, you know, I was trying to think, you know, what have I got? Like, what strengths do I have? And really thinking about London as a space, as a city, is full with creative people. And I thought to myself, if I messaged every studio in the whole of London that dealt with fabric, I'm sure there would be so much waste and surplus, like good quality waste and surplus, that I could talk to people about acquiring for this collection. So that's what I did. I just started emailing everyone I knew, trying to get them engaged with this project. Do you want to be part of this Nothing New project? You know, we're trying to locally source waste for the entire collection. And people were really on board with it. It was really, really interesting. But it also was an opportunity to open that conversation between the creative community. So it was also about design community and the conversations that we should be having across the industry as a whole. So it was kind of an excuse to be able to start talking to people. Not in a way where I was like, this is what you should be doing, but it was just like an opening of a conversation, if that makes sense.
It made totally sense, and I think that's exactly the way how it can work, because like once you'll be like, oh, I've have it all figured out and this is how you should do it, people have like a more extreme reaction to it and tend to do the opposite. And if you have like a kind of an open dialogue, which I'm very much missing these days, you can like exchange ideas and practices, and like because like at the end of the day we're all pulling on the same end, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we worked with loads of different studios. We worked with Simone Roche's studio, Catherine Hamlet, Charles Jeffrey. Who else did we work with? Lou Dalton, Too Good. So it was a really big mixture, and it was quite amazing to see how many of these people were already working on this kind of thing as well, and already thinking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really rewarding project to work with all those amazing designers and amazing studios.
Cool. So for the Nothing New Part 2, which you've presented in September, you've also stepped it up even more because you also started to use natural dyes.
Yeah.
How did you approach that?
So with the natural dye, I mean, I think our plans for 2020 was really to try and close the distance between the soil and the designer. I feel, the fact that clothes are actually fundamentally grown is something that's completely missed by the fashion industry and by designers, including myself. So really the plan for this year was to try and have better knowledge of how we are in our job connected to the soil. From anyone listening to this who's already really interested in these things, like the soil has the potential to sequester more carbon than all of the plants on the surface of the planet. So the soil really is in many ways a potential savior for us. So learning how we can be better connected to that is something that I think is very key to my own design practice going forward. So I guess I was beginning to try and educate myself in the chemical processes that go into particularly dyeing our clothes, of which there are many, and which is extremely terrifying when you start reading into the damaging chemicals. And I guess thinking about our skin, our skin is the largest organ of our whole body, and it's an external organ. Do we really know what effect clothes have on it? If they've been treated with loads of chemicals and we're wearing them all over the largest organ of our body every day, what implications does that even have? Are we even aware of those things? So I think for me as a designer, it was trying to think about all of the processes that go into the fabrics that I use, and using processes of natural dyeing as a way to respect the soil in the terms of where dye has come from, but also where a garment is going to go to. And we try and think about this quite a lot. The beginning of a garment's life and the end of a garment's life always is the same destination and the same source. It comes from the soil and it ends up in the soil.
Yeah.
So what we do in the middle part of that as designers affects the source and the destination. So working with natural dye was really, has been our first step into trying to link ourselves better to that. If our clothes are going to end up biodegrading or in landfill, you know, what chemicals are seeping out of it in terms of the dyes that have been put into it. Where have those dyes come from? How have they been sourced? Where's the excess wastewater gone? What's been done with that? Is that toxic? All those things. So for us, it was about taking those elements into our own hands, and making sure that we knew what we were using to dye things by actually doing it ourselves, by foraging the ingredients ourselves and by doing the process ourselves, so that we were fully aware of everything that's gone into our product.
Yeah, because you also used stuff like avocados, like, or from food waste, I think, to dye some stuff as well. Ready?
Yeah. So I guess that was a next stage of, I suppose during lockdown we've all had this much more increased sense of locality, because we've all had to sort of be in one place for long periods of time, and sourcing our natural dye ingredients from our vicinity has been something that I guess is built on from the Nothing New collection, where we were sourcing all of our fabrics from the local vicinity. So, you know, we were picking all of the oak acorns from our daily exercise walks that you're allowed to do, and we were using that to make a nice inky blue. And we were working with local cafes to source food waste, so to try and avoid the food waste going to landfill, and specifically working with them to start collecting all of the avocado stones, which we then grind down to make a lovely, beautiful pinky dye. So that's been our first steps into that area.
Yeah.
But it's been really exciting to work in that way, and knowing that the fabric has all come from here and the dye has all come from here and no chemicals have gone into it. And you know, if you're buying our clothes here in London and you're wearing them here in London, you're wearing like the most local clothes that you can possibly wear. So yeah, it's just about reducing distance. I can't control how far away our clothes go when they're sold. You know, we sell a lot in Japan and in China, which is very, very far away, but I can control how much miles and how much carbon footprint they accrue when I'm actually making them and developing them. So that's something that we really try hard to kind of have a handle on from the inception of them.
Yeah. So, like, having done all that already and also achieving so much, like in 2020, what's the next step for you and your label?
Oh, good question. That is a good question. Well, I think we're all just trying to figure out what the new landscape is, you know. It's quite different than I was imagining this year to pan out like. Mm-hmm. You know, it's been a very discombobulating year, and I think we're just kind of trying to coast along a bit and not put too much pressure on making any grand plans or grand developments. You know, we're just, I guess, not going into a dormant phase, but just going into a phase where we're not trying to kind of expect too much of ourselves during this time, because it's quite a tough and stressful time for everyone. And I think, you know, we're trying to go into, you know, we have this like yin and yang thing where we're being super, super active and sort of have this external presence, but also then we have the rest time where we are just existing and taking each day as it comes, and hoping that in that rest dormant time, new ideas will have time to and the space to percolate in. So I guess I'm kind of in this time where I'm waiting for the new ideas to percolate. And just, you know, I guess as a designer, your job is to respond to the times that we live in. And it's very hard to do that at the moment because they keep shifting from week to week. So it's very hard to know how to best respond to them. And I think our relationships with clothes are changing all the time. You know, people aren't going out for cocktail parties, people aren't going to weddings, people aren't going to work meetings or gallery openings or festivals. you know, all those things that you might have a specific type of clothing for. We just have these very internal existences, or we're external, exercising. So, you know, I think as designers, we just need to kind of listen to how people are responding to the world with their clothes, and make sure that we're kind of preparing for that and understanding and, you know, responding to it. So, yeah, I mean, and a percolation time, I think, is the next step. And really, the plan for this year was to start working out how we can start implementing regenerative design into our practice so that we can be more closely attached to the soil. So I think that's also something that's an ongoing thing that we're working on in the studio, and we've got a few partners for that recently, so that's going to be quite an exciting year to kind of see how that can come together and how it can manifest in new things that we're making.
Beautifully said, and I'm very much looking forward to what you're coming up with next. And I think it's also like the perfect way to end this interview, except for our the last question that I'm always asking is, it's imagine like there is like no coronavirus at the moment, and you're at the airport and you would be given a free flight, and where would you go to and why?
Well, hopefully it would be an electric aeroplane, and maybe I would like to go to Antarctica.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, such a precious place. I actually have a photograph of us on my desktop computer. I'm looking at the Arctic sea ice map as we speak. I think it's a very important place that affects all of us. So I'd like to make a pilgrimage there if I could go anywhere. But also I think it's also really really out of bounds, because they have people working there that don't have coronavirus. There's no coronavirus there. So I don't think I'd be allowed to go there. But if I could go anywhere, I'd like to go and experience that place for sure.
Yeah, hopefully one day, and hopefully we'll see each other in person soon. I'm very much looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm really happy about the ways that Ara and Phoebe English working together. I'm personally a big fan of your brand, and I'm very much looking forward to the future of our relationship. So thank you very much for doing the interview today, and I wish you all the best.
No, you're so welcome, and I'm so honoured to be able to work with a store that so respects and understands my work. It's very, very special, because it doesn't happen all the time. So thank you very much for making that happen.
Cool. Thank you, Phoebe.
And for having me.
Thank you, of course.